let's go ahead and launch Premiere, okay? And we'll set up a basic little exercise, okay? So go ahead and launch your Premiere. Hang on, I'm going to close out all this email for a minute here. Okay, we don't need this, don't need that, don't need Acrobat. Okay. Yeah, so go ahead and launch Premiere. There I am. And as usual, we will just go ahead and create a new project, right? Just give it today's date up here in the project window, Feb 27. If you want to put exercise, that's fine. And then your location, right? Make sure you locate it in the right spot. Mine's already an exercise, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that just to make sure. Into my spring 2023 exercise folder, which is here. There it is. Okay, and so you should have that name there. And then go ahead and hit create. Right? All right. We're not going to worry too much about the essential graphics panel. We'll cover that some more when we meet next week. Okay. All right. And we'll discuss downloading music. I also emailed everyone a link to an app which works both on PC and Mac by a company called Real Networks. Some of you probably, or all of you are probably familiar with it. It's called Real Player, and it lets you download stuff. For example, you can go to YouTube, punch in the link, and bring in the entire video with music. So if it's a music video, if it's music that you want to use that's already affiliated with a video, you can bring the whole thing in. And then what you do is you bring it into Premiere and you separate it. But I'll cover that. I'm not going to cover that tonight. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but I do have a tutorial that I did like last spring on using it. And I will put that on Blackboard. We can actually take a glance at it tonight real quick. There's also a low-tech way to record your music if you can't get it to work in any app or whatever. And I'll explain that later how to do that. All right, so let's go back into Premiere, right? Let's go ahead and import those images that I emailed everybody, right? And that you hopefully downloaded, right? So I'm going to go ahead and import them here in my project panel. So you should have similar look like a similar workspace like mine, right? I've got my project panel. You're going to definitely need the effects panel because we're going to work in these things right here tonight, video effects and also transitions. You should have, of course, a source panel, a program panel, timeline. We're not really going to deal with audio tonight. And of course, your tools palette, but that should come up anyway over here, the audio meters. And then also you should have that effect controls panel, right? Which is where we did all the keyframing and the motion effects. And we're going to also work with video effects there. All right. So go back in your project panel and go ahead and import those clips that you brought in, right? I've got mine parked right here. The two standard resolution images. One of them says Kinkaku Temple, Kyoto. The other one says Palm Tree Society. Let me make that a little bigger. Okay, let's make that a little bigger there. And then the high res one is just a number. I have that in a separate folder. It's just simply says 81552. Okay. Right. So those are the three clips you should have. Go ahead and import them. I'm going to save after I import those. Go ahead and click on Palm Tree Society, right? You open that up. Okay. Now in the source panel, you can't really tell what's happening with your image in terms of project setting because it's going to fill the frame. Okay. On that note, before we go any further, we actually have to create a sequence, right? Because our timeline is empty. So let's create a sequence and select those settings, right? We know that we can do that a number of ways. we can right click right here in the project panel, right? And we go to new item. We can go to sequence. We can also click down here on this little icon, new item, sequence. You can also go file, new. We don't get a sequence? Yeah, we do get a sequence. And there's even a control N. So that's like 4 ways to do it. Again, control N is PC. I'm not 100% sure what the Mac shortcut is. Okay, so you know what? I'm just going to click here. So, you know, since I'm here, sequence. And as you remember, that gives us all these presets that we can select. Right now, mine automatically went to where I wanted to, but if yours didn't, you can collapse everything here for reference and come back right up in here to the 3rd folder that says AVCHD and expand the little triangle. And you're going to get 3 more subfolders in there. You want to go to the middle one that says 1080p. Okay, so this is also the settings I want you to set for your project 3. Then when you expand that 1080p folder, you get even more. Well, there you get a whole bunch of presets that fall under that specific setting. And the one we want here is 30. You highlight that one. It gives you some specs for that, right? It's 1080p, it's 16:9, right? Your aspect ratio here, right? And your frame rate, which is 29. Think of this as basically 30 frames per second, okay? And there's your dimensions, 1920, 1080, right? Right, so you have that selected, and where am I? There you go. And then you just wait a minute, what did I do? Right, select it, go. All right, double click it, and it drops it into your project panel. Right, it's just going to call it sequence 1, and it has these settings already set. If you ever want to check those settings, right, go to sequence on the main menu. I'm pretty sure I've shown you this before, and you can go right here to settings. And click on that, it opens it up and it shows you what you selected, editing mode, 29, etc. Gives you some other stuff here, working space, color space. There's your width, there's your basic dimensions. So that's confirming that you did select what you thought you selected. Okay. All right. All right. So now let's go ahead and expand your video tracks a little bit, make them a little taller. We're not working with audio, so we can reposition this a little bit. We're not going to do too much layering today. We're just going to really get into some of the effects and what's available. So what Premiere does is when you import, in this case, a still image into Premiere, it brings it in what's called its native format. Okay, it's native dimensions. It doesn't adapt it to your settings in Premiere. Okay, which is fine. It's nice that way because it's kind of like, I don't want to compare it to vectors, but if you bring in a really high res image, it doesn't compress it to match. If your project settings have a lower project setting, lower dimensions, right? It doesn't compress that image. It allows you that option to still bring it in its full resolution. Okay, so case in point, and this is important to understand. So these 2 images, this kinkaku and this palm tree, they're both the same dimensions. You can always right click on them right here in the project panel and go to properties. And you can see right here on the properties, it tells you, well, it's a JPEG, and we'll talk about formats, still image formats, you know, later. And I can also send everybody some sort of a spec sheet on recommended formats. Your file size, which is just the actual how much hard drive space it's going to take. This is 0.5 meg, but this is what you're really looking at. So you can see that this is a little bit smaller, at least on the horizontal, than it is our image, right? We're 1920 by 1080. This is 1600 by 1200. So it's plenty big enough, right? In the horizontal, right? I'm sorry, in the vertical, but on the horizontal, it's a little bit smaller. Hang on one second, Tommy. Let me show you. When you bring that in, that's going to be evident because when you grab this thing from your source panel, Okay, get away. Right? You just grab it, drop it in. If it's really small, just magnify it down there. Then you can see in the program panel, right, that you have this black space on the edges. So the program panel reflects your project settings, right? Pretty sure I've made that evidence. So what you're going to have to do here is, because we want to fill the frame, we're going to resize it. We're going to do a simple motion adjustment, scale adjustment to make it fill the frame. The same thing with the other one, Kinkaku, which I don't even have to drag into the source. I'll just drag it down into the timeline and butt it up against the other one, right? You can see it has the same dimensions. So it's plenty tall on the horizontal, but the horizontals, it's plenty tall on the vertical, but the horizontal is a little small because it's a little smaller than the project settings. Okay, just for the sake of comparison, go ahead and double click on this A5-81552. Now it's going to pop up in your source and it's not going to look that much different. It's another shot of a beach. But once you bring it down into your timeline, watch. I'm just going to put it over here for a second. When you bring the playhead over it, you see the difference, right, in what you're seeing on the program panel as opposed to the source panel. In the source panel, that's the full image. But in the program panel, you'll be like, well, how come I'm just seeing like this little section right here, this kind of like part between the two trees and the sky? It's because this image is much larger than your frame. So if you have a frame that's this big, this image, like this canvas, is like this big. It overreaches beyond the boundaries of what you're going to be allowed to see, right? And that's why, that's because it's a much higher resolution. So you can confirm that as well, right? Right-clicking on this. This is the A522 image. Right-click and you go properties, and you can see that, yeah, well, just the overall, it's 3 times bigger. It's 1.5 meg, or maybe, yeah, 3 times bigger. But look at the image size, right? So that's substantially bigger. It's more than twice the horizontal and like 2.5 times the vertical dimensions of our sequence settings. Okay, now that's fine. It's going to take up a little bit more space on your hard drive. It's going to, you know, that's fine. But what you would have to do to that is click on it, select it. And again, this is, I'm just giving you, this is sort of like for preparation. So when you go download stuff, and we'll kind of do some basic review of, you know, how to download something, say from like Google, or there's another site I'm going to recommend. And I'm sure other people might have some sites too. When you go to your effect controls, right, and you're looking at this shot, you can see it identified here. You select it, right, in the timeline. It comes up here in your project panel. Open up your motion properties and your scale. This is at 100%. So if you scale that down, reduce the size, look, there's your image, right? And then you can find where that fits. It seems to fit just perfectly at 38%. So it's almost a third. You have to reduce it almost by a third to be able to take advantage of the full image on your screen. So try that, bringing that in, resizing it, and now it looks like it's 1920. The advantage now, though, is that if you were to go in and zoom into that image, scale it, like magnify it, so to speak, it actually is going to hold up really well because it's got plenty of pixels to keep your resolution nice and crisp. And that's the difference between bringing in a really lower resolution. I'm going to go actually grab one. I didn't have a chance to grab one. And then doing the same thing, but it's already going to be stretched just to fit your screen. So if you go even further into it, like zoom into it, magnify it, then you're even further stretching those pixels, right? It's kind of like painting a wall with only 1 can of paint when you really need 2 cans of paint to make it rich and thick and vibrant, right? So think of it that way. That's one way to think about it. Okay. Right. And so this image here if I were to do like now, if I wanted to say zoom in on this little section here, I'll go midway into it and add a keyframe for scale and say I wanted to zoom in like on this little beach part or something, or this tree, right? So this is later in the clip, 3 or 4 seconds later, and I'm going to magnify that, right? And I'm actually, hang on, I'm going to actually add a position frame to reference it. And then say here, I'm going to add another position frame so that I can be, say over here and, just magnify, I don't know, let's just magnify that tree, right? So what I'm trying to emphasize to you is that's at 100%, but I can actually go beyond 100% here, right? Keep that position. And, it gives me a nice crisp image. See, so as it goes in, so that extra resolution comes in handy because you can go beyond the 100% and go even further. Okay. So again, the takeaway there is you can find images. They don't have to match your settings perfectly. It's, you can do searches for 1920 by 1080, whatever, landscape, beaches, or, I don't know, images of, I don't know, cars on a highway. I mean, name the topic, you're going to probably find a fair amount, but some stuff that you might want to use may not fit your project settings perfectly. It's okay. As far as going below 1920 and 1080, I wouldn't go super far. You can see that here we're using 16 by 12, not bad. You could do like 1200 by 1000, 1200 by 900, 1200 by 800, 11, maybe even 1000, depends how you're using it. Okay. If you're going to keep the images small on the screen, which you're allowed to do on this because you're allowed to use multiple layers and multiple images on the screen. So if they don't have to be super big because they're going to be small anyway, then that might work in your favor. Again, those are all aesthetic decisions you need to make as to how you're going to tell your story. You're going to see examples of people using smaller images, multiple layers of images on the screen at the same time in some of the samples. All right. All right. So now if we go back to our other 2 clips, which are a little bit smaller, then we're just going to scale them up. All right. So go ahead and click on palm tree in your timeline. Right. Let's magnify that a little bit down there, make it a little bigger. Since we're really only working on 1 layer, there we are. Right. Okay, so we're not worried about this high res thing over here. We're working on this similar kind of shot. It's a palm tree, right? Click on that, position your playhead at the very beginning of that clip and hit your scale. Turn that on. And I can tell you right now, this needs to be at about 120. So type in 120, enter, and it will scale it up, blow it up a little bit by about 20%. So now you don't have that black area on the edges. Then you're going to do the same thing to the next image, this Kyoto temple, right? Click on that. You don't have to leave your effects control, right? You're going to live in this thing, basically, in this panel. Okay, so now you're in this Kinkaku thing, and you can see it labeled here. You can see it labeled here, source. So this is always a great way to know what clip you're working on. If I go back and click on the palm tree, you see how it identifies that I am in that specific clip, right? So let me go back to Kinkaku, this thing, put the playhead at the very beginning, and I'm going to turn on my scale stopwatch, so to speak, and set that value at 120 just to scale it up, resize it, so to speak. So now it fills the frame. Okay, because I want both these images to be full frame. Okay, go ahead and do a quick save. Now I'm going to bring in a lower res image, and I did not email everybody one, but I'm just going to go ahead and get one because I know where I have some, and I'll just demonstrate this to you. Give me a second. I have to make sure I know where they are. Let's see. Let me see. Civilization. Some of these are pretty small. How big is this? Oh, that is big. Yeah, I didn't think that was so big. Hang on. Let me find a smaller one. That's also big. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, so that's a little smaller, so that's not bad. Let's bring this one in. Okay. So I'm going to bring one in that's not super small, but definitely smaller. Where is it? Fuzzy neurosis. We're actually going to work with some of these images probably in a couple weeks. Okay, so here's one I brought in. It's called Fuzzy Neurosis. It's just kind of this little shot like in a subway or something. And it's got this kind of blur effect on it, right? So I'm going to put my high res way over here for a minute. And I'm going to grab this and drop it in. If I right click on it and look at my properties, I can see that, yeah, it's definitely smaller. So this is significantly smaller on the horizontal and not quite half the size on the vertical, right? So if I bring that in and now I click on it, that's how that looks. All right, so that's 1,000 by 666. So for me to fill the frame on this, of course, I'm going to have to click it.
Professor.
Oh, I didn't share. Sorry. Hang on. Let me go back. Oh, I am sharing. All right. Am I not sharing?
I said, sorry, Professor. Please, can you show me how you brought that one in again?
Well, I didn't send it to you guys. I didn't send it to everybody. So I just have it. I'm just demonstrating it. I just imported it. I have it in my own system. I did not email all of you. So so this is just a lower res image. So here I would have to scale that up. So how far would I have to go? Let's see. Well, I could always distort it and deselect this uniform scale and just, extend the width, but then it's going to be distorted, which, sure, I can get away with whatever I want. But you can see there, even on the height and the width, I'm going at least 60% on the height and 109 and another, say, 90% on the width. So I'm almost doubling that dimension. And actually, I'm going to keep it at uniform because if I do a move on that, it's tricky when those two, when it's not uniform. So here, yeah, I've almost had to double the image, which means now if I do a zoom on this, then I'm going to definitely be stretching some pixels, right? Right. So if I go in, that's actually kind of a fuzzy part anyway. So let me go where it's still in focus, but you can kind of see that you start to lose a little image quality. Okay, Premiere does a pretty decent job of trying to keep it together, but if you were to go like really far in here, it's you can kind of see a little bit there. It's kind of hard because I know it's a small image, but the takeaway here is be careful if you go, I would say much lower than something like this. Okay. But if you had to have an image like this that was a little smaller, then just don't scale it so much. Just try to avoid, scaling it too much so it doesn't, zooming, resizing it so that it doesn't pixelate. Okay, stop share. Right? Does that make sense to everybody? Again, this is just kind of like to prepare you for what you should be looking for. As far as if you're going to go and find your images, say online or, in an image site and etc. Okay, because when you go to Google, you're going to get all sorts of stuff, right? And on that note, since we're on just the image part, before we jump into video effects, let's go ahead and go to Google here for a minute. Here we go. All right, so I'll go landscape images here, and I'm going to go here to images. Now I am using the the Chrome search engine. I'm sorry, web browser. Okay, and here again, so you know you're going to get all sorts of options. Most people know this slide. Yeah, let's look at some trees. Well, here we go. Here you get a bunch of stuff down here. So depending what you find, you're probably going to find a fair amount of stuff because there's a fair amount of free stuff online. Okay, I don't know. This one looks really pretty here, right? So I'm going to click on it. It's going to come up. First off, you want to make sure that it doesn't have any kind of watermark. Okay, I'll find a watermark would be something that's faintly written across the screen, right, to protect it for copyright. So you want to be careful with that. So let me go back to that. So in here, say I like this picture. Now, depending, different interfaces are going to be different. If I click on this, it might take me straight to the source. Looks like it did. So this looks like something I can probably bring in. And if I right click on it, right, you never want to do copy link address, save link as. You want to say save image. You don't want to copy image address. You want save image. Again, this is one way to do it, but it's a pretty common way to find stuff. When you save image, right, it's going to give you some name, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and save it in this high res thing. And this is an interesting JPEG ID file. I'm not sure what that means, but let's bring it in, right? So it came into my folder there. Okay. Hang on a second here. And I'm going to go find it. And what is this going to give me? Oh, so it's not going to let me open it. Okay, because it's got some sort of protection on it. So always good to know. It does not, it gave me a strange format. So let's go find some other ones. Anyway, my point is you're going to have to do some searching. Here we go. Or you can always type something like this, for example. There's a typical extension, a good one to use, and it's going to find you images in that format. So here we go. Now, some of these might have backgrounds that you can manipulate because the PNG allows you to have transparency information. More on that later. But let me just grab this one. Let's see. That looks pretty nice. Let me right click on that and save that one. All right, so this is saving a PNG file. There we go. Very, very compatible, easy to use format. Plays nicely with others. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and bring it in and just check that resolution. Right. So again, just kind of walking some of you through this. Let's double click. Okay, looks pretty good. All right. So it looks like it's a little bigger, maybe. Yeah, it almost fits pretty well. So I'm guessing this is pretty close to 1920 1080. So it's a little bigger, not bad. 2000 by 1300. Okay, right? So there you go. That's an example of finding something. Hang on, I don't think I'm sharing. Okay, so this is what I brought in here. All right, so just make sure you before you bring stuff in. Okay, I was pretty confident that was going to work, but before you import everything in, go into the folder you bring it in, right click and check the properties on it. And make sure you can also just open it. Okay. Because for example, what I just brought in a minute ago, which was in this other folder, that one that had a strange format right here, this is what it looked like. See? And when I tried to open it, it gave me this warning. Okay, so that's not going to work. This is the one I just brought in. I can right click on that and always check that. You can do this both on Mac and PC. I know this is review for many, but here. Okay, so I know this is going to be plenty good. All right. So be very mindful on selecting your images, finding your images. There's other sites that you can go find pictures. I use this site myself. I have, you can set up a free account. Hang on, stop share. Trying to get back to the internet. Here we go. Okay, let me close this out. I use a site called Pixabay, if anybody's ever heard of it, right? Pixabay.com. Oh, no, it's not Pixabay.com. It's Pixabay. It's the actual website. Okay, it's pulling up searches. Sorry, it's images. Let me go web. There we go. There we go. This looks like it. Yep. There you go. So this is a site you can set up. You can join for free. Log. You can certainly pay, and there's a lot of stuff on here that you can pay for, but there's also a pretty nice amount of material that's free. And it's photographs. Hang on, Jesus. It's photographs. It's a lot of vector art, clip art, stuff with alpha, not alpha, art, just illustrations, all kinds of stuff. Again, you may find something really nice. You might have to pay for it. Sometimes they will also take donations, but I'm not going to, promote having to spend money. But this is one site, and I'm sure other people have other ideas. And maybe before we wrap up, people can post other links and some places that you can find some material. You also can get stuff through your Adobe Cloud, the Creative Cloud account. There's a bunch of material in there. Maybe we can glance at that later. But there's also resources there where you can get stuff and download stuff for free.